So once we've chosen that topic, that audience, that rhetorical situation, we have to decide how we're going to present this, right? Like I said, we might choose a memo or a professional letter or a newspaper article or whatever else might look good for our audience. So many options out there, right? Maybe it's an open letter publication, so even a newspaper article can come in many shapes and sizes. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So here's an article that talks about, how to adopt pets in Phoenix. So they talk about that organization I was discussing, and you can kind of see how they've presented it, lots of multimodal elements, and the way they introduce things is very straight to the point. It's punchy, all that good stuff. It gets right into it. It's, engaging. But that looks a little different from perhaps this a little bit more professional style. It's less here's how to adopt, but instead we're talking about how this organization they raised money for the rescue. So it's really exciting to kind of see the differences in the way they approach these things and introduce these discussions to the audience. So keeping in mind, this audience might consist of the same people, or maybe they're a little bit of a different approach, right? So depending on who we're talking to, even if we're doing a very different type of approach, it could be the same group of people, but we might be presenting two very different approaches, right? So whether we're presenting an informative discussion on money that was raised, or maybe we're trying to be helpful and tell them how they can adopt for themselves. We can also look at official memorandums or memos. So this is about a related situation, not quite this organization or area or community, but we can see how this memo is designed to discuss the topic of dogs and cats ordinance in Rock Island City. So we're looking at this situation of how they're going to propose that information, design things. It looks very different. It has very different tone, word choice. The introduction is very different type of audience and situation. Or maybe the audience, again, is the same, but it's a very different approach to reaching them. And then we also have professional letters, right? So depending on what we're talking about in these letters, we're going to introduce that and design the document in very different ways, right? So specifically, looking at letters, we have a very different way to engage the audience at the very beginning and introduce to them what this document is about. And then finally, I was looking at some blog posts from different rescues all across the country. And I really liked this as an example because it just shows how you as an individual might contribute. If you're a volunteer or if you're a staff member, or even if you're just an engaged and passionate community member, you could propose a blog post to an organization like this and say, hey, listen, here's my thoughts. So we can kind of go through and see how this is similar and how it might differ from a memo or a newsletter or a professional letter or a newspaper article. So hopefully this helps you get started with this project.